Hi, Vivian. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to see that you've published your master's practicum online, and I'm looking forward to asking you some questions about it. So can you tell us, what is the forgotten text?
Sure, Amy, and thank you for having me here. So The Forgotten Text is a narrative medicine book from a medical and Master of Bioethics student perspective, specifically about the physician's identity formation under the bioethical lens.
Is this an autobiography?
Not really. An autobiography is defined from a personal account. Even though the forgotten text does have that personal account component, it also follows the narrative medicine field. Dr. Rita Sharon sort of defined the narrative medicine field into a component of reflection, a component of empathy, a model for the physician. She also subdivided this into different components, and I choose three of them. The first one is the physician self, and the physician self is exploring the physician in their practice. In my case, since I'm a student, it will be the physicians in the formation. The second component is the physician and the interaction with the patient. And that interaction, what it tries to find is the empathic or the empathy in the encounter. And the last component that I explore is the physician and the public trust. And the way that I explore that is when I, for example, compare medical education regarding opioids or pain medicine and how that education is going to impact my future physician self in the opioid pandemic. So that will be the three components that I use throughout the book, using the narrative medicine model rather than just an autobiography.
That's really great. And can you tell us about the title, The Forgotten Text?
Yes, so the title of The Forgotten Text goes two ways. The first purpose is to have a conversation with Dr. Anthony Moore with his book, The Missing Medical Text, Humane Patient Care. So in his book, he talks about that missing piece component of the patient story that we don't take into the medical note or in the patient encounter. So that is one way to have that conversation, because when we are in the clinical encounter, the way that we have our physician identity formation is going to play an important role in that encounter, but we don't necessarily are thinking actively about that. The second way of that title is because if we were to compare that to a butterfly, and we have the different stage, so let's say that the pre-medical student is the caterpillar, and the physician is a butterfly. The question is if that butterfly remembers how it was transformed in the chrysalid. So this is a very complex way that the physicians are formed. And the question is if it is forgotten or not. One of the examples is our physicians or the butterfly, caterpillar enhanced with wings, or our butterflies something else altogether. So that is something that I try to explore in The Forgotten Text and throughout the book, sort of that mystery of that identity formation during my early training years.
And can you tell us about your choice to use emojis in the text?
Sure. Narrative medicine have a very interesting thing, and it is that it breaks the barrier of time and space. So the way that I see this is every time I read The Use of Force from Dr. William Carlos Williams, I'm actually breaking that barrier because I'm reading something that was done around the 1930s. It is something that was done in New Jersey, and it's by the time where physician goes to the patient house. So that way that narrative medicine allows me to see in that time and in that space. The way that I use emoji is to try to make my own time stamp. And that way someone from the future, if it reads the test, is going to actually read something made in the 2020, something where people use the emojis in everyday life situation. The second thing for the emojis is it actually adds more emotion and other sense and information if it were only the sentences and paragraph or together throughout the text.
And so why is narrative medicine an important part of medical education?
Yes, I think that narrative medicine is very important, the medical education, and it should be encouraged as well. Narrative medicine allows the opportunity for physician in training and even physicians to have a moment of awareness, insight, auto feedback, and reflection. The physician formation's identity is something very complex, and it's actually hard to see that on a task, for example, or something that we can practice around. And it's something that it has to reach the individual level. The way that it should be encouraged, it will be very flexible. Narrative medicine can be from prose, poems, comics, a different array of opportunity. The most important thing is to have a way to record our emotion, records our action, and have the opportunity in the future to have that auto feedback. If it is shared, in the case that people want to share their own narrative, it will be great because then that will allow us the chance to have a collective feedback or a collective insight about the things of how we are working toward that physician identity formation.
That's really great, Vivian. I can't wait to read it. So now that you have a master's in bioethics, you can get back to your medical education. What's your next step in that? Are you a butterfly yet?
Yes, so I don't feel yet as a butterfly. I'll be like a butterfly after finishing fourth year. But something interesting when I was writing is that there's not an end stage for the butterfly. So there are different type of butterfly, and one of the things that I mentioned is even if you have the responsibility of an attending, it is not the same as a senior attending or someone attending that had retired versus a very early trainee attending. So for me, it is an always evolving mechanism about the butterfly. And I'm very excited to continue to explore my physician identity formation throughout my fourth year, throughout residency, and even throughout my physician as a clinician in practice as well, just to have those checking that awareness and feedback of how is that identity for me every single day.
Do you plan to continue writing narrative medicine as you continue your training?
Yes, absolutely. I plan to continue writing narrative medicine. I think that besides of enjoying that way of having something to write on and try to think about, I think it keeps the exercise of having that auto feedback for myself, to have those check-ins, to always know where am I headed to regarding that physician identity formation, that professional identity, especially since it gives you the chance to know not only about the physician self that Dr. Rita Sharon talks about, but also about the physician and patient interaction, which is very important in every clinical encounter. So that will be my plan, to continue writing throughout my education and also throughout my practice as well.
That's really great. We look forward to it. Thank you so much, Vivian, for talking with me.
And thank you for inviting me, and thank you so much for the support as well to do this project in the Practicum in the Berman Institute, and see it live and try to share this narrative with everyone else around, especially with clinicians and people that are very interested in the medical education and the identity formation of a physician.